I never thought my sister would be the one to tear my family apart. We grew up in the same house, shared childhood memories, and wore each other's clothes like sisters do. But somehow, somewhere along the line, something in her turned dark. And one day, she decided to drop a bomb that would destroy everything I had built: my marriage, my home, my peace. She stood in front of my parents, calm as ever, and claimed that my husband was cheating on me. With her. The worst part? They believed her. No questions, no hesitation. Just like that, my parents turned their backs on me, cut us off, and clung to her like she was some kind of victim. I remember standing there, completely stunned, holding our two kids and trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew my husband Dylan, and I knew it wasn't true. But that didn't seem to matter to anyone. What do you do when the people who raised you, who are supposed to protect you, side with a lie? Over the next 2 years, I found out exactly what kind of damage a single false accusation can cause, and how far someone will go for attention. But the truth always has a way of coming out. And when it did, it wrecked everything she tried to build on top of that lie. This is the story of how I lost my family, found out who they really were, and fought like hell to protect the only thing that mattered: my own. Before everything fell apart, life was simple. I wasn't rich or living some glamorous dream, but I was content. I had a husband I loved, 2 beautiful kids who made me laugh every single day, and a daily routine that felt like home. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Austin, surrounded by parks and decent coffee shops. Life felt predictable, and I liked it that way. Dylan and I had been married for 8 years. He's the kind of man who doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's worth listening to. Steady, loyal. He's never been the flashy type, never tried to be the center of attention. That's one of the reasons I fell for him. In a world where everyone seems desperate to be seen, Dylan's peace felt like safety. We met at a local music festival when we were both in our early 20s. I spilled coffee on his shoes and he smiled like it was no big deal. That smile turned into a date, and the date turned into a life. Our kids were still young, just 3 and 5 when everything happened. They had no idea what was about to hit our family, and in some ways I envy that. Their innocence shielded them, at least in the beginning. My days revolved around school drop-offs, packed lunches, and late-night laundry. There was a rhythm to it all. Predictable, repetitive, even exhausting sometimes. But it was ours. Then there was my sister, Veronica. Veronica has always been complicated. Growing up, she was unpredictable. One day your best friend, the next a cold stranger. You never really knew which version you were going to get. My parents made excuses for her constantly. She's just sensitive, they'd say. Or, you know how Veronica is, she takes things personally. But that wasn't it. Veronica wasn't fragile. She was calculated. Emotional when it served her. Distant when it didn't. She had a string of messy relationships, one after the other. Always someone new, always some kind of drama, and every time it fell apart, it was never her fault. According to her, the men were liars, manipulators, and emotionally unavailable. Maybe some of them were. But there were too many broken pieces left behind every time she exited a relationship for it to be everyone else's fault. Despite all that, I still tried to be close with her. I thought maybe if I stayed patient, she'd come around. That one day she'd find her footing and stop lashing out at everyone who loved her. I invited her over for dinners. We let her crash on our couch more times than I can count. Dylan never complained, even when it disrupted our routine. He always said, "She's your sister. We do what we can." Looking back, maybe I was too generous, too trusting, too hopeful that the girl I once built blanket forts with would come back and be someone I could rely on. The thing is, Veronica never really had consequences. My parents spoiled her. They weren't rich, but they gave her what they could, and when they couldn't, they gave her their loyalty. No matter how outrageous her behavior, they always found a way to excuse it. I, on the other hand, was expected to be the strong one, the one who didn't make waves, the one who forgave. There were warning signs, little red flags I ignored, like the time she made a sarcastic comment about how perfect Dylan seemed. or the way she once jokingly asked if I was ever worried he'd get bored of me. I brushed it off as her usual sarcasm. She joked about everything, even when it wasn't funny. But now I realize those comments weren't harmless. They were little test runs, probes to see how far she could push, how much she could say without being called out. And still, I didn't see it coming. Our parents, meanwhile, loved having us all together. They were big on holidays, birthday dinners, the whole picture-perfect family image. Even if there was tension under the surface, it didn't matter, as long as we smiled for the group photos. We had our differences, sure, but I believed at the end of the day, blood was thicker than anything else. That's what we were raised to believe. That family meant forgiveness. That love was supposed to be unconditional. But unconditional love starts to look a lot like blind loyalty when the wrong person holds the power. If I'm being honest, I didn't fully trust Veronica, but I never thought she'd lie like that. I figured she might exaggerate, stir up some drama, maybe even try to manipulate situations for sympathy. But accusing Dylan of cheating on me, with her, that was something I could never have imagined. The atmosphere leading up to that day felt normal. We had dinner at my parents' house. The kids were running around the backyard. Dylan was helping my dad fix a broken cabinet door. Veronica was sipping wine, scrolling through her phone like she always did. Nothing seemed out of place. And then, just like that, everything changed. But I'll get to that part soon. For now, I just want to paint the picture of what our life looked like before everything crumbled. Because when people hear stories like this, they often assume there must have been cracks already. Maybe the relationship wasn't strong, or the family was already fractured. But that wasn't the case. Not for us. We were solid. At least I thought we were. And maybe that's why the betrayal hit so hard. Because it didn't come from an enemy or a stranger. It came from someone who used to braid my hair and sneak out with me to get ice cream past curfew. Someone I once trusted with my secrets. Someone who should have protected me. Instead, she chose to destroy me. What's wild is even during all those years of chaos with Veronica, I never really thought she was dangerous. Difficult? Absolutely. Exhausting? Most days. But dangerous? No. It's strange how hindsight works. How the smallest details that felt harmless at the time suddenly snap into focus when you know how the story ends. I remember one Thanksgiving. Probably a year before everything went down, Veronica pulled me aside while we were cleaning up the kitchen. She looked at me and said, "You're lucky. Dylan actually does what you say. Most guys don't listen like that." I laughed it off, said something like, "We're a team," and kept scrubbing the dishes. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't admiration. It was envy. That cold kind that simmers under the surface. At the time, I didn't know what to do with that look. Now I can't forget it. My parents noticed things too, but they brushed them aside. They didn't want to admit that maybe their younger daughter had some deeper issues, that maybe the dysfunction wasn't just a phase. And, to be fair, they were from a generation that didn't talk about mental health. If someone acted out, you called it moodiness or just being dramatic. You didn't ask if they were manipulative or if their behavior was harmful. You just hoped they'd grow out of it. Sometimes I wonder if Veronica ever saw me as her sister, or if she just saw someone who had the life she wanted. Maybe both. I had the steady partner, the kids, the home. I had the normalcy she craved but couldn't seem to hold on to. And maybe that's why she needed to destroy it. But in those early years, I never imagined she could be capable of something so calculated. She played the long game, weaving herself into every part of our lives, acting like the fun aunt to our kids, joining family dinners, laughing at Dylan's jokes. She was building trust with everyone, even as she quietly resented what we had. And I handed her the keys. I gave her a front row seat to our world and assumed she was happy to be part of it. Turns out she was taking notes. It happened at a Sunday dinner, one of those forced family rituals we kept up even when things felt off. My mom had made her usual pot roast. My dad was cracking the same two jokes he always told, and the kids were chasing each other around the living room, giggling like nothing in the world could go wrong. Veronica was quiet that night. Not moody, just still. She barely touched her food, which wasn't like her. Usually she'd go on and on about how no one cooked like Mom did. But that night, she was scanning the room, watching everyone. Watching me and Dylan. I should have known something was coming. The silence was her tell. Then out of nowhere, in the middle of dessert, she dropped it like it was no big deal. She said, "Catherine, I think you deserve to know. Dylan's been coming on to me." The entire room went still. For a second, no one even reacted. My spoon was halfway to my mouth. My mom had just started to pour herself coffee. Everyone froze. Then my dad spoke first. "What are you talking about?" Veronica looked calm. Way too calm. She said it again, slower this time. "Dylan's been inappropriate with me. I didn't know how to tell you, but I couldn't keep lying." I laughed. That was my first reaction. I actually laughed. It was that kind of disbelief you feel when someone says something so outrageous your brain can't even process it. I looked at Dylan and he looked just as confused. He said, "What the hell are you talking about?" But my parents didn't ask for proof. They didn't press for details. My mom immediately went into protective mode, except not for me or Dylan or the kids. For Veronica. She got up, walked over, and put her arm around her. "Oh my God, sweetie, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that." My dad glared at Dylan like he was about to punch him across the table. And I just sat there stunned. The next 15 minutes were chaotic. Everyone was talking over each other. Veronica suddenly had a full-blown story. Specifics, moments she felt uncomfortable, even text messages she claimed he had sent that she mysteriously couldn't show. It was like she had rehearsed it. Every detail, down to her trembling voice and tearful eyes. But the tears, they didn't feel real. Not to me. Still, no one asked for evidence. No one questioned why she hadn't said anything sooner, why she had kept coming over to our house, playing with the kids, texting me like nothing had happened. They didn't even ask me how I felt. It was like I didn't exist at that moment. I kept saying, "This isn't true. She's lying." But my voice felt small. Useless. Like I was screaming into a tunnel and no one could hear me. Dylan tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but my dad cut him off. "Get out of my house." Just like that. A man who had helped him rebuild his deck last summer. A man he used to call son. He didn't even want to hear him out. We left with our kids that night like strangers being thrown out of a stranger's house. No hugs, no calls the next day. Just silence. That was the night everything changed. The days that followed were a blur. I kept expecting someone, my mom, my dad, anyone, to call and say it had all been a misunderstanding. That they'd thought it through, realized how absurd it sounded. But no one called, not even a text. Instead, the silence stretched out like a punishment. Dylan tried to stay calm, but I could see it eating at him. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt. Hurt that people who'd known him for years would believe something so vile without even giving him a chance to speak. And I kept wondering the same thing. How could they believe her? It didn't take long before the story started spreading. My aunt called me one night, just checking in. You could hear it in her voice, that mix of concern and judgment. She said things like, "Well, I hope you're okay," and "Family stuff is always messy." But she didn't say she didn't believe it. No one did. People started pulling away. Invitations stopped. Conversations dried up. Friends of the family, people who used to chat with us at birthday parties or church events, just avoided eye contact. The isolation crept in slowly, but it settled in deep. And Veronica? She played the victim beautifully. She showed up at my parents' house often, sometimes crying, sometimes bravely holding it together. I know because they told my cousin, who told someone else, who eventually told me. Apparently, she was working through her trauma and trying to heal from the betrayal. Meanwhile, I was the one picking up the pieces of a shattered life, trying to explain to our kids why we weren't going to Grandma and Grandpa's anymore. Dylan and I leaned on each other like never before. We had no one else. The only person who truly believed me was him. We talked late into the night, whispering, through the tears, trying to figure out how to move forward when the people we loved had erased us. And every now and then, I'd go back over that night in my mind, trying to find the moment where I could have stopped it, Could I have seen it coming? Should I have warned Dylan about the little comments she used to make? Should I have spoken up louder at dinner? But those thoughts didn't help. They only fed the guilt. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliating. Being painted as the blind wife who didn't see what was right in front of her. Being treated like I was in denial. When the truth was, I wasn't denying anything. There just wasn't anything there. 2 months in, things went from quiet to worse. My mom sent me a message. Short, cold. She said, "We're going to keep our distance until things settle. I hope you understand." No apology, no softness. Just a clear message, we're not on your side. And that's when it really hit me. They didn't want the truth. They wanted comfort. And Veronica, for all her chaos, gave them that. She gave them a narrative that made sense to them. One that didn't force them to face the fact that their golden daughter was broken in ways they never wanted to admit. But the hardest part? The kids started asking questions. Why can't we go to Grandpa's house? Did Grandma get mad at us? What did Aunt Veronica do? And how do you explain that? How do you tell a 5-year-old that sometimes adults lie and other adults believe them? We tried to keep their world stable, school, routines, family dinners with just the 4 of us. But the hole was there. Empty chairs at birthday parties, no more backyard barbecues with cousins, a quiet ache that never quite left. And Veronica kept soaking up the attention, posting vague quotes about survivors and toxic people, sharing filtered selfies with captions about healing and growth. It was like she was performing grief, pretending to rebuild from something she had completely made up. At some point, I stopped hoping for an apology. Instead, I started hoping for the truth. It was almost 2 years later when the shift began. By then, we'd built a new kind of normal. Smaller, quieter, more guarded. Dylan and I had stopped expecting closure. We weren't waiting on apologies or explanations anymore. We were just living, healing, slowly, privately. Then I got a message from Eric. Eric was Veronica's new boyfriend. Well, fiancé, actually. They'd been together almost a year at that point, and I hadn't spoken to him once. I knew he existed because my cousin had mentioned him in passing, saying, "Veronica's finally found a good one." That made me laugh. If only he knew. His message was short, polite, but direct. "Hey, I know we haven't met, but I'd like to talk. I think there's something you should know about Veronica." I didn't reply right away. My heart was pounding. Not because I was scared, but because deep down, I knew. I knew something had cracked. When we finally talked, Eric was calm. Almost too calm. He said he had questions about the night of the accusation, about the way Veronica talked about me and Dylan, and about some inconsistencies in her stories. I asked what changed, and he told me. He'd found messages, not from Dylan, from someone else. A guy Veronica had been seeing on the side for months, maybe longer. He confronted her and everything unraveled. She admitted the affair, tried to spin it like a mistake, like it didn't mean anything. But that wasn't the part that stuck with him. It was what she said next. She admitted the whole thing with Dylan was made up. She said she was jealous, that she didn't mean for it to go so far, that she just wanted to shake things up. Her words, not mine. Eric was stunned, disgusted, and done. He called off the engagement, moved out, but before he left, he wanted me to know. "You didn't deserve what she did," he said. "Neither of you did." And just like that, the lie started to unravel. Word spread quickly. My cousin called me within a week, asking if it was true. Then an aunt. Then my mother. My mom's voice cracked when she said, "We didn't know. We didn't want to believe it was a lie." And I didn't say anything. What could I say? That the damage was already done? That their silence hurt more than Veronica's lies? Veronica tried to do damage control, of course. She told people Eric had misunderstood, that things had gotten twisted. But it didn't work this time. The mask had slipped, and once people saw even a glimpse of the real her, it couldn't be unseen. What shocked me most wasn't her confession. It was how many people suddenly changed their tune. How quickly. They wanted to talk, to reconnect, as if 2 years of betrayal could be wiped away with a single phone call. But still, something had changed. For the first time, I wasn't the one being questioned. She was. The truth didn't just slip out quietly. It exploded. After Eric left her, Veronica didn't disappear. She spiraled. The attention she once soaked up started turning into something else. Questions, doubts. People who used to rush to comfort her were now asking, wait, what really happened? And for someone like Veronica, that was worse than being hated, being doubted. She called me. Once, I didn't pick up. She didn't leave a message. I stared at her name on my screen for a long time, wondering if she was going to say sorry, or if it would just be another attempt to rewrite the story. I never found out. I never needed to. But then something I didn't expect happened. My mom invited us over. After 2 years of silence, of missed birthdays, of our kids not even remembering the last time they saw their grandparents, she called and said, "We want to talk. Can you come by?" We went. I didn't know if it was the right choice, but Dylan and I decided we owed it to ourselves to at least listen. When we arrived, it was quiet. My parents looked older, like the years had weighed on them too. There were no decorations, no food laid out like before. Just a plain living room and a weird, heavy silence. No hugs, just stiff hellos and long pauses. Then my dad cleared his throat and said something I'll never forget. He looked right at Dylan and said, "I'm sorry. I should have given you a chance to speak. We were wrong." I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear those words until they left his mouth. For 2 years, I had carried the weight of silence. And now suddenly, there it was. An acknowledgement. Then he looked at me. "We let her hurt you, and we let you walk away like it was nothing. That was our failure." My mom started crying. Quietly. She didn't say much at first. Just sat, with her hands folded in her lap, eyes down. But eventually she said, "I thought I was protecting her. I thought she was telling the truth. And I wanted to believe it because the alternative, it meant we didn't really know our own daughter." And that's the core of it, isn't it? They couldn't believe Veronica would lie like that, because that would mean admitting she was capable of something deeply wrong. It was easier to believe Dylan had slipped up, easier to paint me as blind than to face their own blind spots. They told us everything that happened after Eric left, how Veronica unraveled, how she confessed in pieces, never a full-on breakdown, but enough. Enough for the lies to lose shape, enough to see it had never been real. I didn't say, "I forgive you." Not right away. I wasn't ready. But I did say thank you. Not because everything was fine, but because it was something. And something, after 2 years of nothing, was massive. After we left, Dylan and I didn't speak for a while. We drove around in silence with the kids asleep in the back seat. But his hand stayed on mine the whole drive. That weekend, Eric and Dylan met for coffee. I stayed home, pacing the house, wondering how it would go. When Dylan came back, he said, "He's a good guy. Too good for her, but smart enough to leave." They'd talked about everything. Eric had questions, some still unanswered. But mostly, he wanted Dylan to know he believed him. That he had always sensed something was off, but it wasn't until Veronica dropped the mask that he saw the full picture. We laughed that night. Not a little chuckle, like really laughed. It caught me off guard, how easy it felt. Like a crack of light through a thick door. We were still in the wreckage, but for the first time, it felt like the worst was behind us. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Things didn't magically go back to how they were. We didn't suddenly become a happy, united family again. But something softer settled into place. Something more real. My parents started showing up again, not in grand gestures, but in small ways. Dropping off groceries, asking if they could take the kids to the park. Offering help, not advice. And they never brought up Veronica, which I appreciated. For once, they weren't trying to smooth it all over. They were just trying to be present. The kids were cautious. They didn't quite understand why these people who had disappeared were now back in their lives. but slowly they opened up again. It was bittersweet, watching them laugh with my dad like they used to. There was joy in it, but also grief for the time we lost. As for Veronica, she faded out. We haven't spoken since. I heard she moved to a different city, started over. Part of me hopes she gets the help she needs, but another part of me doesn't care. I've spent too long giving her my energy. That chapter is closed. The biggest change came in the way I saw things, how I defined family, loyalty, love. I stopped trying to win people over, stopped justifying myself to anyone who doubted me. Dylan and I rebuilt our life, not around old expectations, but around new values, honesty, boundaries, peace. Eric and Dylan stayed in touch, not often, but enough. They text every now and then, usually jokes or updates about work. It's strange how someone who entered our lives because of a lie ended up being one of the most honest voices we encountered. I won't pretend the scars are gone. They're not. They show up in unexpected ways. Hesitations, flinches, the pause before trusting someone new. But we're still here, still standing. And that means something. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who should have protected you, you know how lonely that can feel. You know how heavy that silence is when people turn their backs on you. But I've learned that the truth is stubborn. It might take its time, but it always finds a way through, and when it does, it clears out everything that was built on the lie.